then, yeah, I don't know if you want to start answering the question or if you want to start with like.
Why don't you ask me a question and then I'll answer it?
So, yeah, what got you started with antique boats?
Well, I remember him from a small boy, growing up with him up in Crooked Lake in northern Indiana. My grandfather on Crooked Lake had a 1957 all-wood Century Palomino. That's my earliest memories of boating. I used to sit in my dad's lap as he drove the boat, and I just loved it. And we would sit on the shore, and Chris Crafts and Century inboards would go by with the low rumble. And my dad always said, one of these days I want to have one of those. So I would call it a long-term love affair with these old wooden boats. There's just something about them that grabs your attention.
Yeah, and so why would I want one? As a like, why do you customers get them? Why?
Well, there's not one reason people love these wood boats and acquire them. There's several different reasons. Many times it's a legacy boat, and what we mean by a legacy boat is it might have been the boat Grandpa had on the lake. They may have learned to ski behind it. That was his boat. And then that boat got passed down to his son. And now what we're seeing is it's being passed down to the grandchildren. And the grandchildren love those legacy boats because of all the memories that they have in the boats. They think of Grandpa and Dad. And they love them for the same reason their parents and grandparents loved them. Just because there's something very romantic about something that's handmade, isn't popped out of a mold like a plastic boat. They know actual people were in there with screwdrivers and drills and saws and actually putting this thing together. So each boat is a little bit different, and that makes them extra special.
Perfect. Yeah. So why? I guess why do you have one? What was your first one? How many do you have now? What's your favorite?
Okay.
And you can like, I always tell people with like my favorite movie. I have 3 favorite movies, but they're distinct categories for you know. So you could.
Okay. All right. Well, my first wood boat that I owned personally was a 1950 Chris Craft Riviera, very similar to the one on the wall behind me. I found it in a barn up in Auburn, Indiana. I think I paid $2,300 for it. There were 2 raccoons living in it. They made it their home. They'd eaten most of the rubber off the wiring. They ate most of the upholstery. It was in pretty sad shape. But I wanted something to do. I've always loved woodworking. My grandfather was a master carpenter. And it was just something I always wanted to do. So with a little convincing to my wife, she went along and we purchased the boat. It took me a year to restore it. Made a lot of mistakes on that first one. But I thoroughly enjoyed the process. The boat turned out actually quite nice. And we used that boat for many, many seasons up on Adams Lake. And finally we kind of outgrew the boat. So somebody purchased the boat for me, and then we purchased another Chris Craft, 1956 Capri. Again, we found it in a barn down in Markle. It was just as bad, but once you do one, you know you can do another one. And that's why we just keep doing them, is because people love them.
With the first one, what was like? Do you remember the like? Oh, was there like a moment where you're just like, oh, good, I get to go like back 3 weeks now? Like to your point, like was there the worst mistake where you're just like, this is the, or did that come later?
No, I always felt comfortable doing the restoration. I was always concerned that we did it right the first time because I didn't want to have to go back and do it over. And that's the philosophy we do here at the shop even today. Do it once, do it right the first time. You won't have to go back and correct anything. But you know, just like any beginner restoring a classic car, restoring a home, and especially a boat, you learn as you go along. And you do make some mistakes, and that's where you learn. And that's how I learned to do boat restoration. I had done a lot of reading, talked to other restorers who were very helpful at the time. And it really was not that difficult if you take your time and just don't get too far ahead of yourself. And you need to make the process enjoyable, and that's what I did, and I just fell in love with the restoration process.
Nice. So how many do you have now? How many? Well, this is I guess 2-part question. You personally, how many boats have you restored? this is a lot of questions, I guess. Well, first one then, you did do the first one by yourself, essentially, over that year?
I did about the first that I personally owned, I probably did the first 4 all by myself.
Okay.
And then I got my first client, and we restored his boat, and then I asked someone to help me, Mike, who had just retired, because we started getting calls. People liked the work that we did. So we just kept it going, and word got around. It was mainly word of mouth, and people started bringing us boats, and next thing you know, we've done more than 250 restorations. We're on our 3rd location, have 9 workers now working in the shop, and we're booked out over a year. So things are pretty darn good right now. It's because we do good work. I think the reason we do good work too is because we have a really good crew that enjoys being here. They want to work on them. They have a love affair with the boats just like I do.
Seriously. Yeah, how many do you have right now? Boats could you throw out in rotation?
I couldn't even tell you. I probably have 6 or 7 boats right now.
Okay.
But Jan, my wife, I think she only knows about 3 or 4.
That was my follow-up.
Yeah. So but she's been great. She's never given me a hard time about acquiring another boat. I've bought boats and flipped them. I've probably owned 15 wood boats in my life. I enjoy, obviously, the restoration process. So when we get a boat done, a lot of times we'll use it for a few seasons, and then we'll move on to the next project. And she is every bit as invested in this hobby now as I am, and she loves these wood boats. In fact, a quick story was when I did the very first Chris Craft Riviera. There is expense involved, of course, and a lot of time in the garage. And I got some pushback occasionally and said this is the last one. Dust was going through the furnace all over the inside of the house. And so May comes and we go to put the boat in the water, and she wasn't real sure because this was my first restoration. Is it going to sink? Is it going to float? Is it going to run? Is it going to stall? We're going to have to get towed in. Is the motor going to blow up? So we backed the boat in the water, and it floated, and it started. And we're running around Adams Lake, just kind of cruising around, not pushing the boat too hard. And everybody else in their plastic boats start giving us the thumbs up and waving at us and beeping their horns. And it was at that time Jan looked over at me and grinned and said, "Hey, let's do another." And so we did, and that's kind of how it all got started. So I currently have 3 boats that I use on a regular basis. They are all currently Centuries. I'm a Century fan, and we've done boats for both our kids, who absolutely love the wood boats. They don't enjoy working on them. They're both professionals and have different careers, but they each have a classic boat and would not give it up for anything. And I think part of the allure of that is the fact that their dad did the boat, so it's very important to them.
Very cool. There was something with the. I guess you did say it.
So
yeah,
we can go on to the other reasons why people love wood boats.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Okay.
So
Alright.
yeah, keep going.
So one of the main reasons is legacy boats, which is a family boat. The other reason, people like old things that exhibit craftsmanship, whether it's a 1950 Plymouth, a Duesenberg, a 63 split window Corvette. There's something about the nostalgia that people still have a love affair with, and when they see these boats, there's something that draws them in. They're just cool. And when you're out on the lake and you pull up beside somebody or cruise by somebody with that low rumble coming out of the exhaust, and you got that gleaming varnish mahogany in the interior, the boats look incredibly awesome on the water. People stop what they're doing and they look at that boat go by. So a lot of folks really just like to be noticed, and it's something different. You feel good inside of it. And so a lot of people are that way. I would say 30 to 40% of our clients are repeat customers. They finish one restoration and then maybe they want a little bit different boat. They may start out with a runabout and they want a bigger boat for family, so they go to a larger utility. They may want a third boat just to take to boat shows, and they leave it on a trailer. So they'll do that as well. So everybody kind of has their own reasons, but that generally falls into 2 or 3 categories. And whatever the reason, the people that come in, many times they'll invest more money into a boat than it will be worth market value. They don't care. They're preserving a piece of history, and they just like the way they feel when in the boat.
So legacy, how you feel, we'll get a name for that. And is there another reason that you get?
I would say preserving history, which I touched on, and people just like them. They just, what I said, they feel good in the boat.
So you, like, I guess because, you're in, like, Century. If you had to choose Century, Chris Craft, like you're saying Century, to you personally, it's like people with Mercedes and BMW.
Well, there's different quality of manufacturers, but generally folks prefer Chris Crafts because everybody thought a wood boat was a Chris Craft, just like they used to think a copy machine, they were all Xerox, which they're not. So Chris Craft is the name that's most readily identified with these wood boats. They were also the largest manufacturer of wood boats at that time. And Chris Craft is an extremely well-built boat. They built thousands and thousands of them. They were reliable. People loved them. They were very utilitarian. You could pull skiers, go fishing in them. Century is just another manufacturer. It'd be like comparing a Ford to a Chevy. That's the main difference. Most of my boats are Centuries. Just me. I think they provide a little bit better ride. Their interiors were a little more plush. And they put bigger motors in the boats. So the boats were generally faster, and I like fast boats. So that's one of the reasons we like the Centuries. And my family felt the same way, that, boy, this boat just rides a little bit better than a Chris Craft. But the Chris Crafts bring more money than the Centuries because that's what people identify with when it comes to these classic boats, is Chris Craft. You've got other manufacturers too. You've got Hacker Craft, which was built up in Mount Clemens, Michigan, along with Garwood in the same area. You had a lot of Canadian builders. You've got Shepherd, Ditchburn, Fay and Bowen. At one time there was over 100 classic boat manufacturers. And what really made Chris Craft and Century both premier, but Chris Craft even more so than Century, was Chris Craft was able to, under the guide of a gentleman by the name of Bill McCarrer, went to an automotive plant, saw the manufacturing assembly line, and really got Chris Craft to manufacture boats on an assembly line basis rather than having one crew work on a boat until it was completely done from beginning to end. It was much more efficient to have somebody put a bottom on a boat, one crew, move the boat down, they can do the decks, another boat move down, they can do the sanding, staining, and varnishing. So Chris Craft really pioneered the assembly line method of production for these boats. Century soon followed suit. So as they produced more boats, it brought the cost down, which really opened it up to the every person to have a classic boat. So Chris Craft was an extremely good value for the boat, and they were expensive in the day, as was Century. If you had a mahogany inboard boat back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and even up into the early 60s, people knew that you had arrived. You were able to take that discretionary income and invest it in a really nice boat. And back then the boats took more maintenance than they do today because we have modern adhesives and varnishes and so forth. So yes, there's a lot of manufacturers, but only a few of the manufacturers really mastered the assembly line production method, and that brought the cost of their boats down, made them more economical for families to own.
Cool. I don't have anything other than the last thing I would have you do is kind of tell the story if you're a boat coming into the shop.
Okay.
Like even, to your point of prior ownership, like the legacy. Not that you have, but like kind of you could, like, yes, the boats we see came from grandma, grandpa, tired old ladies, like whatever, you know what I mean? Like, and we could do
Sure.
it a couple times, but it's the idea that these are kind of going to be the beginning, middle, and end of audio for the commercial. So,
Well, the boats that come into the shop come in all different stages. Some are very sad and tired and look like they should be thrown on the burn pile, and others just need a little refreshing. But generally, when the boats come to us, they're in pretty sad shape. They've been neglected for many years. Some many times just left outside with a tarp on them. Maybe the motor quit running, and hey, let's stick that boat outside and let's get a new fiberglass boat. And next thing you know, 15, 20, 30 years goes by, and then somebody comes along and says, you know, those boats are really cool. Let's get that restored. So that's usually the condition we get them in. So the process is we photo document the boat to make sure that we have all the photos we need, so when we go to reassemble, we know what's going where. And then we disassemble the boat. And when we disassemble the boat, that means we remove the engine, the fuel tank, steering wheel, all the deck hardware. Basically, the only thing that's left is wood. And then what we do is we always make a general assessment. We poke around with an ice pick to find out where problems are. It's usually dry rot in the bottom or in the transom area. And we always start with the bottom first, move to the decks, the sides and the decks, and work on the staining and varnishing last. So we always roll the boat over. We support it internally to the structure. We roll the boat over. We remove the bottom, which sometimes can take some time. And at that time, we can determine if the structure is in good shape or if it needs to be repaired or replaced. We seal it. And then we replace the bottoms the way the manufacturers did, only with the exception we use modern adhesives rather than what they used to use. So the boats are watertight, they don't leak. And once the bottom's done, we roll it over. And then we start on the sides. In the transom, we try to preserve as much of the original wood as we can because it's really part of the boat, the way it originally came out of the factory. But there are times when the wood is just too tired. It may be brittle, it may be rotted, cracked, broke, whatever. We always replace those with the mahogany wood to match what's currently on there. When that's finished, then we start on the top sides. And we'll replace the decks if need be, reroute the deck seams. And so bottom, sides, and decks, that's the order. And once that's finished, then it moves on to the sanding and fairing stage. We always bleach the boats, and then we stain and varnish. And after that, then becomes the assembly process. Hopefully the motor's back from the remanufacturer. We do 12-volt conversions on all the old 6-volt motors because they start and run better. They look cosmetically correct. And the assembly part is sometimes, most of the time, the most time-consuming part of a restoration. A client will come in and see a boat, it's all stained and varnished, and he said, wow, we're 90% done. No, we're half done at that point. The last 10% takes the most time to do. That's where it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back at times. You find out if parts are maybe broken that you thought were good. So the assembly time takes quite a bit, and then we water test and we put all the boat through the water trials to make sure everything works, that the motor works correctly, the gauges work correctly, the bilge pump if it's needed. Anything that is mechanical gets checked out on the boat trials. And then after that, we do a thorough cleanup, set it back on the trailer, and she's ready for pickup.
So what? This is the last thing I lied. I was thinking about this though. Like, was the 96 Bulls or 97 Bulls are arguably like the best team. So like, what makes ABS the or whatever is the best team in your mind and why they were? Why is the ABS the best in the U.S. other than maybe your buddy in Lake Tahoe? Yeah.
Well, I don't think there is a best restorer. I would say there is a best tier or level of restorers, and I would say there are a half a dozen in the country, of which we are definitely one. I think it goes to quality of the restorations, the number of restorations you do, and we've done as many, if not more than anybody else in the country as far as number of restorations. We obviously do very good quality of work, otherwise we still wouldn't be in business. We wouldn't have as many repeat customers as we do. So yeah, I would definitely put us up there in the top 5, let's say. But there are some restorers that are excellent restorers, and they will specialize in a certain kind of boat. They may specialize in a Chris Craft barrelback, or maybe they specialize in Century Coronado. So they limit their scope to a specific year, make, and model, and then they become total experts in that boat, and they may not touch another model boat. We have done so many different types of boats, so we feel very confident because of the number of restorations that we've done. We can do anything, and I'd put our restorations up with anybody else's. The nice thing about the restoration community is we're really not competitors as much as we are colleagues. We help each other out. We meet each other at boat shows. If I have a mechanical issue, I'm having trouble, figuring out, I can talk to another fellow restorer. Chances are he's had the same issue and can help me out, and it goes the other way too. I get asked questions all the time by some restorers. I'm happy to help them out. There's plenty of business for everybody, and it's a very close-knit, tight community of the restorers, and there's a great mutual respect there for what we do. So there's no combative feelings whatsoever. It's a very friendly, close-knit group.
I think that's what top tier talent does. I think that's awesome. I mean, they help each other out. So I'll add one more. Do you say something about, with what you're saying about giving out information to other people now that we have this? Maybe just obviously we haven't done social media forever for whatever reason. Now we are, which is helpful for these other restorers. We hope to, just
well, we have. I didn't produce them, but the ACBS has produced several videos of us replacing bottoms.
Okay.
And they can go to that, and if they join the ACBS, which
what is that?
That's the Antique and Classic Boat Society.
Okay.
And that is the premier classic boat organization in the country, if not the world. And I was obviously very involved in that for 10 years, was on the board for 10 years. I was president for a year. They wanted to produce a library of restoration techniques in certain areas to help amateur restorers that want to restore their own boat, which I applaud. And this gives them assistance, and it tells them pretty much everything you need to do if, say, we did a video on 5200 bottom, how we like to do it, which I think is the correct way to do it. And you can go on there and watch that and see what we do. Now, seeing is not always going to enable you to do, because it's a little bit different to actually do it rather than to watch it, but it does give you a lot of information on how to proceed if you want to go that route.
Cool. Okay, then say something about instead the new added value we have to our boats is our videos that we are going to, to your point of nostalgia. I mean, if you do still want to do that and feel that way, because I want to add that into this for sure as audio. So in the past, many clients, and understandably so, want a photo documentation of the restoration of their boat. And this is for 2 reasons primarily. The first one being they enjoy showing photos to their friends. This is what this thing looked like when we rolled it out from under the tarp and took it to the shop. And this is all the process that I had to go through in order to get it to what it looks like today, which is a showroom ready boat. And so they like that. We've had some people that have made table top books, like coffee table books with these things. And they're really pretty cool. And the other one is, what if I have to sell this boat someday and I tell somebody it's restored? They're not going to take my word for it. They want to see photographic proof, not only that it was restored, but it was restored correctly, each step. So that's the other advantage of giving them photographs. Well, now we're going to an extra step, providing an extra value to our restorations, and that is we will give you a video library of the restoration process. Photos are great, video is even better, because you get sights and sounds, and you can actually see in movement the process of restoring the boats, and sometimes that's even more helpful than a still photograph. So that's something that we plan to be adding. I was going to shoot the door actually after you said that as part of that.
thunder?
That's what I thought.
Yeah, we're supposed to get storms, I